P. Chidambaram is going to step out in some time from now to present his 8th budget, equaling Morarji Desai's record of presenting the maximum number of budgets. He's got a tightrope walk because he has to try and ensure that he delivers measures which help improve sentiments, help pump up growth, and also at the same time deliver steps that will help bring in the sort of populism, help bring in the sort of votes that the government is really banking on. I want to introduce our panel this morning. We've got Farunjoy Gua Thakuda with us, we've got Sunil Alak joining us, we've got Gurcharan Das joining us, we've got Devinder Sharma and Dr. Rajiv Kumar. But I also want to show you these images coming in this morning of P. Chidambaram as he makes his way out of his residence and heads to North Block, where the budget papers will be looked at one last time. The budget papers, of course, have reached Parliament already, and those papers will then be read out starting 11 a.m. sharp. And I also want to tell our viewers that we've got a team of 25 top analysts who will be looking very carefully at every single announcement that Chidambaram makes and decoding what that announcement means to you, our viewers. So we've got the Deloitte budget buzzer, which will be coming up on the bottom corner of your screen, which will really break down what Chidambaram's announcements mean for you, our viewer, because to us, you matter. This is not about jargon. This is not about technical words being bandied about which don't make sense for many people. This is about the implications the budget has on you and your wallet. I want to go across first to Rajiv Kumar. He's joining us on this broadcast. Mr. Rajiv Kumar, I want your sense of this tightrope walk that P. Chidambaram has to do. Will he try and pump up market sentiments, or will his focus be more on populism?
Pumping up market sentiments is not bad as long as it is done on solid, honest and good economics. And the tightrope walk that you mentioned is actually between making good economics the stuff of good politics, or just pandering to the political requirements that you have, that the minister faces. And here I think what we are going to look for very clearly is that, and as the survey says, it's all about shoring up the investment sentiment, because the rate of growth of investment, which used to be 16 and 18% per year, has come down to 3.9%. And unless investment picks up, there is no growth, there is no employment, there is no recovery. So I think but at the same time, the finance minister faces tremendous pressure to do the populist things, to increase allocations on on social schemes, to get the food security bill going through, to try and tax the rich, etc. And I just hope that he will not pander to these to these requirements, to these political requirements, because today we are at a point where the economy is pretty much on the edge of a precipice, and if we do fall down, it will take us a very long time to recover. And I just hope that doesn't happen.
Okay, Sunil, the fact clearly is that investments are going down, savings are going down. There is a lack of enthusiasm in the India growth story. But he also has to try and ensure that he tries to do what Manrega did for the last government. Will he be able to manage those two conflicting aims?
See, the way I look at it is that whenever you're on an aircraft and they tell you that, look, if there's a problem with the aircraft and you're going to go down, there'll be an oxygen mask which drops down, and all of them tell you, even if you're traveling with your own children, please put the mask on yourself and then help others. We don't have the money. I mean, much as what you are saying, we need to look after. See, it's the right thing to say. What about the poor? How are we going to give them money? But this year, you don't have the money. So it's about time that everybody realize that, look, we've got to, as Gurcharan was saying earlier, we're going to live within our means and put the mask on the economy first. If you come down to saying you can print notes and give as much money as you want, but if it's not productive money and pure social money and saying, okay, how are you going to live, then I think you're not going to strike the right balance.
No,
because
you've got the priorities of the reformers and you've got the priorities of those who run government, like Sonia Gandhi, who are very keen on ensuring, forget whether it's 4.8, 5.2, that's just a number. Yeah. I need to ensure that I'm back in power next year.
See, but the number is important. This is when you're in a crisis, this is the time when you make good economics into good politics.
Can I just
can I just finish?
Please.
And so that number, what you were talking about, what the finance minister has to tell people is that a 1% rise in our growth rate will add 1.5 million new jobs. Each new direct job creates 3 indirect jobs. Then if you total that, that's 6 million jobs, 60 lakh jobs. Each job supports a family of 5. That's 3 crore people get immediately benefited when you rise by 1%. So when you have dropped, well, it takes great talent to drop from 9 to 5. When you've dropped 4 percentage points, just do the math. How much pain have you inflicted on this country? And that's really, it needs to spread that good economics will eventually make good politics, not giveaways.
Paranjot, this is important because India was getting used to an 8% rate of growth. They were hoping for a 9-10% rate of growth, and suddenly you're saddled with 5% rate of growth, and people don't like that, and they expect Chidambaram to deliver greater growth now.
You know, for the Aam Aadmi, the fiscal deficit as a proportion of GDP doesn't matter. What matters is inflation, and food inflation in particular, and you've just not been able to control food inflation. It's at double digits. You know, I asked a straight question to Dr. Raghuram Rajan yesterday at his press conference. I said, which country in the world is today cutting its fiscal deficit? Yes, I accept our fiscal deficit as a proportion of GDP is higher than many countries, Brazil, Russia, etc., BRICS countries and so on. But across the board, in almost each and every country across the world, at a time when there's a great recession, we have a slowdown. People are spending more. The government is incurring higher deficit. Then you say, the quality of the deficit, damn it. Okay, we find we need to cut the flab. But while cutting the flab, are you going to cut into the muscle? That is the real and present danger. Let me say, these word reforms is a very nice word. The problem is it means different things to different people. And in a pre-election year, this whole issue of creation of new jobs. We have here a study by the IAMR, the Institute of Applied Manpower Research, part of the Planning Commission, which says that India was growing at 9.5%. There was negligible creation of jobs. That was when we were growing at 9%.
So now you're growing at 5%.
So precisely, the big criticism is that Dr. Manmohan Singh, he was supposed to be a man of integrity. He tried to do away with the monopoly of Coal India Limited. You had Coalgate instead. You had crony capitalism, Mr. Das. You talked about his economic sense.
It was never denationalized, sorry.
One minute. He tried to, I said, he himself said coal blocks should be allotted in a transparent manner. It took 8 years for the government to do it. And who are the people who got it? You know. The friends of relatives of our minister. The point is, you know, what has happened in the name of reforms is a degeneration into different forms of crony capitalism and corruption. This government is it's the last full-fledged budget. It's under attack. It's unable to control food inflation. That's widened the gap between the rich and poor in an already highly unequal society. In a situation like this,
is it an argument that expanding the fiscal deficit will improve the food supply?
Rajiv,
why are you connecting things which are just completely unconnected? I'm sorry to say that, but you know, I mean, I heard Gurcharan say that reforms does not mean getting into crony capitalism. He's been insistent that reforms. Hang on, but the fact is that, and to just correct you, UK has been cutting its fiscal deficit for the last 3 years. And they've brought actually the sword to the public expenditure, reducing expenditure by as much as 25%, even in the Ministry of Defence. Hang on, it's not, you can't just generally make a swipe and say everybody across the board is expanding their deficit. Just a second. It cannot be anybody's argument that a government which is recklessly spending more and only financing consumption as a result with that expenditure, which is what Manrega and the Farm Debt Waiver and the Sixth Pay Commission and these other allocations have done, that sort of expenditure which only makes consumption go up and does not improve your investment capacity and production capacities, makes sure the demand continues to outstrip supply. So you are very right that you have to improve food supplies, but for that, for God's sake, you have to go invest in rural infrastructure and not in handing out subsidies.
I have no disagreement with you, but one minute. You've had your say. Give me an occasion to say. What have you had? You have a situation where you've squeezed the real incomes of not just the poor, you've squeezed the real incomes of the middle class.
How?
1 minute. Because of inflation. Because of food inflation. They're saving less. And where are they putting their money? In gold. That's your second biggest item of import. Why do you have a high current account deficit? Not just because of high oil imports, also because you're importing what, $60 billion worth of gold.
Because you don't have financial instruments to
please let me complete the argument. All I'm saying is that the fiscal deficit doesn't matter to the Aam Aadmi and the government for the government, and where the government has failed, and this is where your good economics and good politics comes in, is that you've been unable to control inflation in general and food inflation.
So what we're seeing, Devinder,
I am
is
saying
very conflicting expectations from the budget. The economists in corporate India say bring down the fiscal deficit. A lot of people say it doesn't really matter. What they need to ensure is that the Aam Aadmi feels the government's working for him, which might mean increasing expenditure, which is bad economics, but might deliver good returns in the election.
Well, I think the point that Prananja made is very clear. Reforms for whom? Is a basic fundamental question that we need to ask. Is the reform only for corporates? Give them more so that they can sell their kitty, and the nation can go to hell. I think that's what it looks like. Now the entire debate is being centered around this question that populism will be dominating, or pragmatism would be dominating. I think if you look at today's debate, or debate happening for last few days, populism today is saying go in for spending cuts. I look into the media, I look into the print media as well as the television media. So popular mood is to go for cut in subsidies and go for all those kinds of things, which I think is not pragmatic. And for a change, I think the definition is not changed. It's not the populist mood which is saying that you give us Narega and so on. The populist mood that I see in the studios is that you go for cuts. There's the need for no subsidy for poor, or cut in subsidies for poor, for food, fertilizer, or for the inflation can go up and so on. That's nothing important. I think Mr. Chidambaram would have a great task if he has to walk the tightrope, as you said. But I think more important is to understand reforms for whom. The other point is, somehow in this entire debate, I realize the economic sense and common sense, there's no convergence nowadays. Economic sense, when I look at it, it's all talking about growth.
Okay, it's very interesting. We have in our studio completely contrasting viewpoints on the solution, and all of these need to be taken in, Mr. Gurcharan Das, before Chidambaram can decide what he can do, because he'll get panned either way, as is very clear already from the tone and tenor of this.
I agree with a lot of what Devendra has said, but there's one thing I firmly disagree, and that was the word reforms for whom. And this is precisely what we were talking a few minutes ago, which was that if the reformers had sold the reforms properly, then people would understand that the reforms are for the Aam Aadmi, that when you create competitive markets, they bring down costs and prices, and they raise quality of products, and they help everyone and create a rule-based capitalism. Now, when you don't do those reforms, you get crony capitalism, because what you have is then the discretion remaining with the
True, absolutely. I want to go across now to Mumbai. Joining us from our Mumbai studios is Govindra Jaithiraj. We've got Maru Kinai joining us also, and they've got some corporate voices and stock experts explaining what they're really looking for Mr. Chidambaram to deliver. Govindra.
Thanks, Rahul. So, we've got very interesting views. I think you've summed it up there in Delhi. There is a problem with subsidies, but more than subsidies, the question is, where is the income coming from? You can go ahead and spend as much as you want, but if you can't balance it out, then we have a problem, and that's the problem that Chidambaram needs to address. Let's get a couple of views here. Mr. Haribhakti, let's begin with you. I think you all understand what the factors in this matrix are. What is the one that he can really, what are the buttons that he can really press, or should he press at this point in time?
He should make corporate India skate on ice. I for implementation, C for commitment, and E for expansion of the tax base, of the commitment to pay taxes, the commitment to investment, and the implementation of all the great ideas that have been around for a while. Particularly important is GST. If that happens, then we will have the twin engines identified in the survey, SMEs and jobs actually kicking.
Okay.
Mr. Pradhan, at this point, we've been talking about how Chidambaram has to walk the tight rope between the investor and the voter, which might not necessarily be the same. Do you think this budget, the kind of expectations that you have, is it going to rely more on populism, or is it going to be more fairly towards corporate India?
He has a great work to do on that, as a matter of fact. Razor's edge, as one would say. But more importantly than that, is what I look at is the implementation issue. Despite the fact that there have been so many budgets in the past, and we have seen so many schemes coming in, how much implementation has happened? Unfortunately, what has happened is that there is no holistic form, so to say. if we have the ports in the private sector ports now there's no connectivity. If we had the cold chains for which the government had talked about, but there are how many cold chains have come in? So ultimately, if there is no holistic reforms, if it is not looked at it from the point of view of the totality of the picture, it will not result in anything. So you may talk about infrastructure, you may talk about agriculture, you may talk about ports, but unless it is merged together, unless there is something to say that, all right, at the end of the day, you are going to account for it and say that this is what I have done and this is what I have ensured, then only there will be a reform process, and that will be the fruits of labor will come down.
Mr. Haribhakti, you were mentioning that you were quite pleased with the economic survey. Has that kind of reassured or at least raised expectations as far as India Inc. is concerned?
Absolutely. India Inc. seems confident today that we will see a 150 basis points reduction in interest rates because of the twin engines of inflation control and rate reduction by and they will act in tandem. We are convinced that there is seriousness about fiscal compression.
There's also an implicit argument that that's what's holding back growth, higher interest rates and inflation. Are those the
there are supply side constraints and there are unimplemented infrastructure projects, and basically it all boils down to implementation. And I think the focus is coming back on that. What we have seen in the last quarter is a lot of implemented ideas. Diesel price enhancement, railway freight increase,
so
not causing inflation.
Back to a real world after 2 years of...
Because fiscal compression is the big driver of inflation. Now that is becoming very clear. So if it is compressed further, if from 5.3 we can get to 4.9, it will be big.
So you talked about the skating on ice, thin ice or whatever ice, but what are you looking for specifically from the finance minister's speech? So you touched upon GST, that's one.
Right.
What is?
I'm looking at the building of silos as a big game changer, because that is the infrastructure which is going to destroy our 70 million grain mountain. I'm looking at action on gold, dematerializing gold, making it a liquid pledgeable security.
So should they be increasing import tax?
I'm not in favor of increasing import tax. That's a very limited impact idea. The real idea has to be that how do people who are hoarding this gold get it out and make use of it?
Well, clearly, Rahul, the sentiment here from Mumbai is that as far as India Inc. is concerned, going by the economic survey and what the finance minister has been doing the past few months, it is clearly very positive. The expectations are high. I wonder what the Aam Aadmi feels at this point, Rahul.
It's very interesting. The stock markets have opened about 450 points up. Very buoyant in the build-up to this budget, Sunil. You know, they think of Chidambaram as a man who knows what he's doing and is doing what they want him to do.
Normally, you know, the stock market start with a low.
It starts with a high. So the point that I want to make is that anytime you want to stop any discussion which makes common sense, just throw in 3 words, what about the poor? And then everything stops, because everybody wants to do something for the poor. So, but the question is how? So just carrying on saying, oh, this is for the rich, oh, this is for X, or this is for Y. If we get away from those kind of statements and we say, all right, is this the right policy? And if somebody is not executing it correctly by being corrupt, throw the corrupt out. Don't throw the policy out. Like, you know, like people were against FDI and retail, and I could see both the Walmart. No, Walmart is a bad company, it's being tried. So throw Walmart out, don't throw FDI and retail out.
People are also very circumspect, Mr. Gurcharandas, about the FDI and retail being allowed now finally, but no one's really coming in because they don't know what happens. So this uncertainty which is crept into the Indian growth story, that needs to be dealt with.
Correct. Last point, Gurcharan, just one quick last point I want to make on this is like, look, as far as we are concerned, people are saying tax the rich. I don't know what he's going to do, but it will be a great political move to tax the rich. Who's defining the rich and who's defining the poor? Because I did a few maths. There are only 50,000 people out of 100 crore people who pay 60% at a personal tax level. 60% of India's personal tax comes from 50,000 people. Tax them, kill them.
Mr.
Carry on.
3% of India's population pays income tax.
I agree with you. I'm then saying out of that 3%, which works out, I've got the figures here, out of the 3 crores, 50,000 pays 60% of the taxes collected. Okay.
So therefore,
now, I'll just finish this argument through. You know, what you need to do is, there are rich farmers. I'm not saying tax agriculture.
No, but they say the constitution doesn't allow the farmers, rich farmers to be taxed.
No, but who are the rich farmers today? How the political system are the rich farmers? But if you even ask them to pay 5%, That's all. We are paying 33%. Widen the base, get more people to pay taxes. You're going to be far better off than taxing the
Do you
so-called
think
rich.
he's got the approach all wrong instead of focusing on the super rich?
Yeah, you see that Sunil has a good point, that the amount of tax that you will collect will be so small. Whereas if you spend that same energy in widening the tax net, improving compliance, and partly that's there right now. I mean, GST, for example, if there's a hard line going to GST, I think that will give a lot of confidence.
No, but there's hard talk and no hard action.
GST will improve compliance enormously, and
why has it taken such a long time for the government to move towards GST? Let's assume it's a great measure. It unifies our market. It introduces transparency.
Why has it taken
so long? Why has it taken the government to bring along the states on board? If everybody thinks it's a great idea.
It really goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is that our reformers have not sold the reforms. The fact is that this is, India is one of the unique countries where the budget is an iconic event in which the whole nation participates. And for 2 weeks, you have a chance to educate the people. And the way Margaret Thatcher educated the labor, attitudes of the labor, how labor changed to new labor.
Okay.
And it was happened because of that education. Now, taxing
I'm quite charmed by your repeated references to Mrs. Thatcher,
Yes.
I mean, because
she saved the British government, my dear fellow. You may not like her politics, and I may not like her politics, but she had made the British government a lot more accountable, a lot more a lot leaner. And so don't have a knee-jerk reaction about Margaret Thatcher,
really
which is what the left does in India.
No, I'm really wondering how relevant her views are to India of 2013.
Absolutely, because that is precisely the mindset.
Rahul,
She changed.
Can I give you some small numbers, going back to the tax thing? There are 250 million households, 30 million pay tax, right? Because that's 3 crores, 30 million pay tax. Let's say there are another 40 million below the poverty line. Then there are another 30 million who are below the threshold. And there are, if you like, 60 million households in agriculture who earn more than 50% of their income from agriculture. If you total all this up, it still leaves you about 30 million people who should be in the tax net but who are not in the tax net.
And why shouldn't that happen? Focusing, absolutely.
Why shouldn't that happen is anybody's guess.
I want to go across to Rahul Shivshankar. He's at the CII headquarters. And the Indian economy, Rahul, as our experts are saying, is on a cliff. We need to ensure that Chidambaram does what it takes to push up growth instead of somehow getting crippled by populism, which takes it on a downward slope. What's the sense you're picking up from corporate India now?
Well, good morning from the corporate boardroom. Joining us in our studios here, Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee, Chairman of the Feedback Infrastructure Services Private Limited, and Mr. Anshuman Magazine, Chairman and Managing Director of CBRE South Asia Private Limited. Let me begin with you first, Mr. Magazine. There's so much pressure, and we've been hearing some of our experts in our studios talking about this. So much pressure on Mr. P. Chidambaram to come up with that one big idea that could sort of fire the economy. The survey silent on that one big idea. Perhaps that's a good thing, because what's needed is a well-identified action imperative that, as some of our experts are saying, steers clear of populism, but also doesn't completely squeeze out expenditure.
Well, the key is, of course, and I'm not saying anything new, how to stimulate investments and consumption. If we have to really bring economic activity, if we want GDP growth to go up, it will only come in because of investments and consumption. So therefore, if we can look at, there are many things one can do, but this is a budget, and a lot of times we discuss about things which the budget can't do. Budget can only take fiscal measures. And really what the finance minister can do in the budget is to look at the taxes, look at the interest rates. I don't know how much he can, because there is a challenge of inflation, and really the money supply coming to the economy. If you look at the real estate structure, the sector or infrastructure,
at the moment
money.
there are short-term flows, which is a big concern.
So it's liquidity. Yeah. Then that is from the developer side, people putting infrastructure projects. How to get them long-term money at a lower cost. I mean, that is the bottom line. And on the consumption side, how can people get loans or money at a cheaper interest rate? I think these are the two areas which, of course, are very difficult to balance, but that's what the economy requires right now to stimulate investment and consumption.
Mr. Chatterjee, do you agree with that? Do you agree with the fact that one needs to be a little conservative right now? Focus on the fundamentals, or do you need that one big out-of-the-box idea that can capture the national imagination? Remember, this is also an election budget, and budgets are big statements here in India.
No, I don't think there is any one such a glamorous out-of-the-box idea that's going to lift everybody's mood by 12 this afternoon. I don't think that's expecting too much. There will be a slew of measures. From the infrastructure sector, we actually have three major expectations. One is to remove the minimum alternate tax on infrastructure, because if you give a 10-year tax holiday and then put a 20% MAT, it seems illogical. The second bunch relates to getting retail investors not to save in gold and various other non-productive assets, but to actually put it into infra bonds. So we hope there's a special package of incentives to gear up infra debt market, which is really increase the limit for income tax exemption as well as give tax-free status to non-PSU infra bonds. And the third relates to the power sector. In the power sector, the biggest demand of the power industry, because new capacity is stalled, is that the sunset clause for income tax holiday ends on 31st March. So instead of extending it by 1 year and 2 years and etc., can the sunset clause be just postponed for the entire period of the fifth plan? Some kind of credit guarantees to state discoms. And therefore, this package for, there is a special fiscal package. The distribution companies are owed a lot by the regulators, called regulatory assets. I don't want to get into technical aspects, but the budget is expected to provide some liquidity push from that system. About 30,000 crores is stuck there into the hands of companies from the regulators. So this is the broad three expectations on what the budget can do in the infrastructure sector.
But let me just quickly come back to this point, Mr. Magazine, because there has to be a tightrope walk. I mean, the fiscal deficit spiraling, the economic survey has already outlined the red button issues. Red lines have been drawn. The target is 4.8, to rein it back to 4.8 over the next 1 year. How do you see the finance minister achieving those targets without actually, without compromising some of the social sector schemes, which are very expensive?
And I think it will be a challenge. These numbers sometimes I feel, it just seems like a number, but they do really have a big impact. I think one area, of course, which has not been talked about as much as it used to be done before was privatization and disinvestment. There's a huge amount of money sitting with some of the PSUs, which is really sitting not really productive. I think there has to be a push. I know the stock market is low, but there has to be some way that they need to unleash all that liquidity and also, make them productive. And there is a massive amount of money. This is not a small. If you look at Air India, is one glaring example, which is losing thousands and thousands of crores of money has gone to Air India. It is completely not productive. And not only Air India, I'm just taking one example, is bleeding because of the low fares. The other airlines are bleeding because of them. And there are many other PSUs. So I think that is one area where the government can get liquidity. Then, of course, investment, FDI, is another area to really get that money into the economy. But GDP, this deficit is going to be the biggest challenge for the government. If they really resolve, I know it's election time, they'll have to do on spend money on social areas, but there is, if they really go after it, they can reduce it.
Okay, Mr. Chatterjee, very, very quickly. What's the one thing you're going to look at so that, or at least corporate India is looking at, so that they come away feeling a little reassured in the long term? What's that one move?
In the social sector outlays, while we are expecting it to be cut, we are actually expecting far tighter control on delivery. That's the one thing that we look forward to.
Okay, we've got to go back to the studio. Thanks indeed, Mr. Magazine, Mr. Chatterjee, for joining us. Now, corporate India beginning to outline some of its expectations here.
We'll come back to you, Rahul, in just a moment. Our panelists in the studio having a big discussion of their own, even though we're not on camera yet. But I want to talk about the fact that investor confidence has been slipping. The fact that so many Indian corporates now, Sunil, are just moving away from India, investing abroad. Arresting that trend is something that Chidambaram needs to focus on, that Indian corporates have to feel invested in the India story.
I come back to the point that was raised, I think, by Gurcharan or somebody else in the morning, is that, look, what is our problem is that the industrial manufacturing area, they don't have any demand for their products. Okay, so you see them lowering prices, lowering profits and whatever, and nobody's demanding their products. Prices of essentials, as somebody, is going up, and therefore there is a shortage of supply. Why is this happening? Is the price of essentials are going up because you are doing non-productive money which is going out to people. What are they going to spend on? They're going to spend on biscuits, tea. Once it arrives in their hand, which is free. Now, Narega will have an impact for 1 or 2 years. As soon as that is over, if there is no permanent source of income, then again you'll have to give another 60,000 crores. So the question is, how do we build a model? I'm not at all saying that they should not get it. But you're creating a supply problem in essentials by increasing demand without bothering about where is it going to come from, and you're doing reverse in the industrial
goods area. You're pumping in this much money in the hope that it will reach the
Rahul,
poor people without being able to ensure, Devinder Sharma, that the money actually reaches those to whom it's meant.
I think what you are saying is a very important question that you raised today. You know, there is always a feeling in this country that, you know, the investor confidence is not there. Finance minister must do something and whatever, and FDI should flow into this country. All the FDI has nothing to do with the budget. That's okay. But, you know, if you look at the FDI retail when it got approved, so much of excitement in this country. Now FDI, if everything has been
it's not got approved. Hold on. It should have been.
Hold on. Even if it was, let's say, the way you wanted, 16,500 crores is all that you're going to get in the next 5 years. That's what the assessment of the industry is. Now, the question I want to raise is, last March, the corporate sector in India was sitting over a cash reserve, which I call as cash hoarding. They were hoarding cash to the tune of 9 lakh crore. This is the official data. And now the RBI has pressed a button, panic button, saying that, you know, the outflow of FDI from India is also phenomenal. About 50% of FDI, whatever you get it. That's what RBI says. 4.5 lakh crores is going out of the country. Now, why can't those investors within the country invest in India?
No,
if foreigner can make money,
they don't feel as if
they
it's conducive.
I don't get the confidence of investing in the country.
Devinder has raised an amazing question. Corporates are sitting with 9 lakh crores and not investing in India. Now, what do you do about it? That's the question. Yeah. Can you order them to invest? Can you make a law saying that you must invest in India? Or would you rather create the conditions that they feel assured and certain that their investment in India, in this country, will earn them this kind of return that they would want to earn, right? Now, this is exactly the point. Now, you see, because if you don't do that, these investors are going to continue to invest outside. And today, 20 companies, some of the largest companies in India, have 50% of their earnings coming out of foreign operations. Now, what do you want to do with this?
And money moves.
No,
they don't need to stay invested in India. They will go to Africa, to Latin America, wherever they get money.
Just let me comment on this. All I'm saying is, if foreign investors can come in India and still make money, why can't Indian investors invest in India?
No, you're contradicting yourself. 1 second, please. You said that the FDI and retail, FDI and retail would have brought in only 16,000 crores.
That's what the industry says.
I'm agreeing with your figure. You know, when China opened up, they only got one McDonald's store. What did that McDonald's store send as a message? That China has now opened up. Once again, it brought nothing in except a sentiment that we want to go in because China has opened up. FDI retail, whether it brings 16,000 or 10,000 or 5,000, is completely irrelevant. Can I just finish 1 second? I'll just finish the sentiment story. So I'll just end. Therefore, how do you create a sentiment that FDI comes in and to say that, look, only rupees will, there's a combination which I was telling you yesterday also. We have a $22 billion current deficit. What is our import bill? It's totally related to other countries have reduced they've increased or reduced the value of their rupee or devalued it and taken care of exports. Our import bill is fixed. We are relating to areas which import of oil. Where is that foreign exchange going to come from? So you have to say, I need dollars, I need rupee investment, so I cannot stop one and starve the other, or start one and starve the other. I'm only saying, please don't say FDI is not important. I'm saying FDI is important for the following reasons. Not because if you don't import the oil, you think your Aam Aadmi is going to collapse. 1 second, I'm just going to say everything affects the Aam Aadmi. You're right that fiscal deficit they don't understand. They understand what is the price of diesel, what is the price of oil, what is my price of potatoes and onions. We have to explain, as Gurcharan is saying, how everything that we are doing affects that. Now, if people don't know how it affects them, they're going to say FDI is bad, corporates are bad, they're going to do X, they're going to do Y.
No, but I think process of liberalization has trickled down enough, Mr. Gurcharan Das, now for people to realize that by and large opening up the economy has been good for this country. People have benefited, they've seen their sons, their daughters earn salaries.
No, but the corruption has destroyed it. What I'm trying to say, if the sentiment has got destroyed by the corruption, so now suddenly all that was good, everybody's saying, was it good? These guys are making money, nothing is coming to me.
Has crony capitalism killed the feel-good that liberalization earlier had?
Well, to some extent, it has diminished the luster. But I would say it really goes back to a more fundamental question. And that is, here's a country which gives its people enormous religious liberty, political liberty. So why can it not give its people economic liberty? In a country where 3 out of 5 people are self-employed, it's a country of entrepreneurs. And in a country, why should our country rank 119th on the Freedom Index? Why should it rank 132 on the ease of doing business in a country? And so this is the question.
Important questions. I want to bring in Abhishek Singhvi, senior leader of the Congress party, joining us on this broadcast. Our experts in the studio feel, Dr. Singhvi, that one of the greatest failures of the Congress government has been its inability to sell reforms as being pro-people. The fact that reforms have benefited the Aam Aadmi is not fully understood by the common man, which is why the opposition is able to torpedo every reform process or suggestion by making it seem to be very anti-Aam Aadmi. What do you make of this criticism, Dr. Singhvi?
See, first of all, I think it's a very general criticism which can't be answered so generally. But to the extent that there is always scope for improvement in communication, in communicating the good work we have done, I would actually accept part of it. Do better communication. True, in the sense in which it is raised, because had we not been able to communicate the identity of the government, the Aam Aadmi face of the government, the progressive, pro-poor and pro-inclusive approach of these policies, we would not have come back in 2009 and we would not have kept doing as well as we did in several polls and several places. So there is a understanding that, and I must say one thing more, it is wrong to call it populist. There are, let me give you very quickly 3 names: Manrega, food security, and let us say loan waiver. There are many more. These are conscious, deliberate policies of the government. They are taken by facing the electorate upfront and telling them, this is our identity, this is our view, this is the path we will take. It is a job of the budget to find funding for this. It's not really a populist policy of the budget.
No, but these are also hugely wasteful schemes. For example, Manrega, just last week, Dr. Singhvi, on Headlines Today, we exposed how a lot of that money was not reaching the person for whom it was meant. There were fake job cards being created, just ditches were being dug, there were no ponds. When you're spending the money, people would like to ensure that this taxpayers' money is actually going to the people for whom it's meant. There's a lot of wasteful expenditure which you're not being able to curtail, sir.
I am very happy you asked the question. Please understand the nature of the scheme. We go on the front foot and say we are going to do it irrespective of deficiencies, point 1. Point 2, there are obviously bound to be deficiencies in any of the schemes of this size. And the criticism to plug the deficiencies is well taken. But see the difference when Manrega started and today. Internal audits by the Congress, government audits, fine-tuning and calibration has meant that Manrega deficits and leaks are a fraction of what they were when they started. And with all the deficiencies, don't the pro-rich programs have deficiencies? Don't tax shelters and exemptions given in the Income Tax Act for companies have deficiencies? Is there not fraud there? Don't rich people cheat? But you also have good done by these pro-poor schemes. Despite that, and the object must be to make constructive criticism on how to plug the leak and make it better.
So are you making clear to all people who are watching this broadcast, Dr. Singhvi, that the focus of the Congress party, the push from the Congress party is to ensure that this budget is pro-Aam Aadmi. Investor sentiment doesn't matter so much. Trying to ensure that foreign investment comes into India, more jobs are creating, that's not so important. The focus is that this is an election year. We are building up to the big Lok Sabha elections. Now Chidambaram must do what it takes to ensure that the Congress can, as Gurcharan Das was saying, buy more votes.
Fortunately, unlike the provocative questions of anchors, the Congress does not think in terms of binary, either populist pro-poor or pro-rich investor. We find absolutely no contradiction in it being a balanced budget. To answer your question specifically, to the extent that it's a pro-poor face of the government, that is a given. It doesn't change in any budget. A pro-Aam Aadmi face does not change. But to suggest that it's populist, I'm challenging the very concept. These are official government policies. Populism is something different. This budget, this government budget is in a pair of safe hands. You know from the nature of the finance minister who's presenting that he's not up for populism. You will have to have the challenge of balancing it. But you just saw in the rail budget, we have bitten the bullet wherever necessary. We have bitten the bullet in foreign investment, in the FDI. We bit the bullet on raise of rail fares in January. We bit the bullet on freight increase in the railway budget just now. We have bitten the bullet in petrol and diesel. I repeat, diesel increases despite all the
Okay, Paranjoy has a question for you.
Paranjoy, I believe that this will be a balanced thing. But for you to create an equation, either this or that is wrong.
Okay, Paranjoy.
Dr. Singhi, I'm so happy that you're sounding like a good socialist, a good Congress socialist. But you know, when you look at Mr. Chidambaram, he seems to be far more concerned about cutting the fiscal deficit, about, you know, increasing the growth rate. He doesn't seem to be talking that much about controlling food inflation, you know, creating more jobs. You know, considering that this is the last budget, a full-fledged budget before the 16th general elections, somewhere along the line, I mean, how do you think Mr. Chidambaram is going to walk that tightrope? I mean, should he be emphasizing more on controlling food inflation, creating jobs, than on cutting the deficit?
Paranjoy, let me start on a lighter note by saying that in India, everybody is not only a socialist but has to be a socialist. Our definitions of right and left are very different from that of US and UK. I always joke that the most left-wing Democratic Party view would be to the right of center of an Indian view. Absolutely. We are a developing country and our left approach is necessary. That doesn't mean communist or extreme left, but it means left. Number two, I straight away concede, let me be very clear, I would be less than honest if I did not, that the biggest challenge facing the country and this finance minister in this budget is how to do 2 or 3 balances. The fiscal deficit, one, a clear need to have demand-pulled investment to spur the economy, and inflation. Now this triangle is not easy to resolve, and that's the meaning of a real challenge. What has happened in the past of 5% is distressing, but certainly we are trying for at least 6.5 for the next year.
Okay, Mr. Gurcharan Das has a question.
Personally speaking, and you know, predictions and views about the budget are very hazardous because it's known to the Prime Minister. It's a simple thing that he will have to do something about discipline of fiscal and yet find ways in which the people will put more money out of the pocket into investment.
Mr. Gurcharan,
that is a challenge. You'll find it in 2 hours.
Mr. Singhvi, I'm so glad to hear what you are saying. You're sounding very, very responsible, let me say. But your party made a false choice beginning in 2004 when UPA 1 began, where they made this false choice between equity and growth. And therefore the whole emphasis, whether it was pushed by the leftist parties or whatever your coalition partners, but the fact is the emphasis went from infrastructure, from the golden quadrilateral, which was going on a very rapid path, to social welfare. And this is what has brought us to our economy to our knees. The economy has come to its knees partly because of this false choice.
Very important question.
In the last 4 months, it's good to see that the balance is being restored, that we need fiscal tightening and we need monetary easing to solve our future problems. And therefore, I would really hope that the position you are taking now and the position that the finance minister has taken in the last 4 months will become will be what the budget will reflect in 2013. But let us not get away from the fact that Congress made that false choice between equity and growth. And just 1 second more, You know, there's a recent study we were talking about here, Rajiv and I, the study made by the World Bank, Jaz Ghani, which shows that they did a study of that within 10 kilometers of the Golden Quadrilateral, what a revolution has come about in terms of jobs, labor productivity, number of factories that have come up. And so this is the right way for us to go to fight out of this.
Dr. Singhvi must explain that the approach must be to ensure that you create infrastructure which then takes care of everything around it, as opposed to wasteful expenditure which lands in somebody's pocket, probably a contractor, not necessarily even the farmer, but doesn't lead to productive ends. Dr. Singhvi.
Look, that's been a long comment and a long question. It raises a very important issue, and Mr. Gurcharan Das, a very respected columnist whom I read and respect his views a lot. It raises an issue which requires much more debate, and I can't answer such a deep, long question at this moment. But I deny, with all the emphasis at my command, that, you know, it can be called a black and white false choice. The whole meaning of the Congress UPA 1 and 2 has been that there is no contradiction, and there should be no contradiction, and there should be an attempt to the best extent possible to marry distributive justice with growth. That is the attempt. Now, if you consider that making a conscious political decision to have Manrega, to have a loan waiver, to have food security is a false emphasis on equity, then that's a matter of debate, a matter of personal choice. The Congress certainly doesn't think so, because we take the bullet to the chest, we go out of the country and say, look, we may even not have enough money. You may have deficiencies. Those deficiencies will have to be plugged progressively, but we think it's a good policy for the poor. Okay. But to suggest that we are doing it at the cost of growth, no. It is this government, barring the last year, and I want to answer the question of the fourth choice in half a second. Despite distributive equity of a massive scale, it is only UPA 1 and UPA 2 which has given you 8.5+% growth. Don't go by the post-depression and the last 1 year, but it's been a fantastic growth pattern with these schemes.
Okay, Dr. Rajiv Kumar has a question for you, Dr. Singhvi. Dr. Rajiv Kumar.
Dr. Singhvi, wonderful to hear you. The point that Gurcharan was making actually is that perhaps the UPA 1 and 2 both have emphasized consumption-led growth much more than leading the growth from expanding investment and production capacity. I'll just give you one figure that's come out of the economic survey. In December 2008, there were 100 large projects which had stalled with a value of investment of 700 crores, caught into them, the 100 of them. In December 2012, the figure is 600 projects with 7,500 crores invested in them and not going anywhere else, just completely blocked. Why hasn't the attention of the UPA 1 and 2 been given on these projects? You set up the Cabinet Committee on Infrastructure, has come to naught. And that too after 5 or 6 years. Why not the emphasis on expanding production capacity in the country?
First of all, let me say that it's very intimidating to be subject to inquisition by eminent economists, ready with facts and figures. I don't pretend to have either expertise in economics or facts and figures.
Is that a lawyer's dodge?
But
you dodged Gurcharan Das's
you're right,
question.
I didn't that part of
you're prefacing to dodge this question also.
Barring, no, I never dodge. You're not allowed me to complete my answer. Highways may be one example where in the earlier years, growth has been slow. In the last few years, highways has picked up. But investment-led growth has been the object. Power sector addition as an investment infrastructure sector has been, capacity addition has been impressive. Telecom growth story has been remarkable, but for the 2G, post-2G scam situation where there are a lot of controversies going on. So it's not as if, yes, if you pick up only the highway issue, which is being again and again said, in the earlier years of UPA 1, there was a problem. It has picked up to some extent. We've worked over those MOU problems and the standard format template. Now to answer your second point, that there is, yes, part of it I must concede, has been at times due to coalition compulsions. It is with that realization that the investment board or the investment committee or the cabinet committee or whatever you call it, has been set up. The attempt is to speed up. There is always scope for improvement. And I entirely agree that investment-led growth, along with consumption-led growth, and along with the reducing fiscal deficit, is a question I throw back to the economists to advise Mr. Chidambaram how to solve this golden triangle.
Okay, Dr. Singhvi, for joining us this morning. Thank you very much.